Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. This is Charlie here, and I have to tell you, I'm very excited about our show today. You know, a handful of times in the past, we have so enjoyed our time with a guest that we have said we must do a follow-up to this conversation. Well, today is the very first time we were able to schedule such a follow-up in back-to-back weeks. And our guest from last week, Jimn Kyles, author of the popular book Unstuck and Unstoppable, has graciously agreed to be with us once again. Last week, we focused so much of our podcast time in dealing with the first notion of his book, which is all about how to become unstuck in situations in life. Today, we want to tackle the second idea of the book, and which is how to become unstoppable, and unstoppable, how to be convinced and believe that you can move on to a better phase in life. And Jim has articulated a process that he has designed for what to do as next steps toward entering that realm of unstoppable or accomplishing your dreams or who you want to be. So with that, let's welcome once again author, entrepreneur, and church pastor, Jimn Kyles. Jim, welcome back to the next chapter with Charlie.
Yeah, so good to be back with you. It was such a great time to be with you last week. It's just honored that you would invite me to come back and continue the conversation. So thank you so much.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. You know, as I was reading through your book, I came across a line that I really like. You know, you're very quotable. And before we dive into the process of building a renewed life, I'd like for you to talk about a line from your book that was very poignant to me. And you stated, your best life is not an easy life, it's a significant life. Tell me more about what you mean by that.
Absolutely. Well, I love that quote as well. I think the popular myth is your best life is what makes you happy, and it can be full focus towards things that are fleeting and temporal. And so the point of that is your best life, not all those things. The life of significance. And it doesn't always mean easy. So it's helping us to redirect our focus and to really set a new goalpost, if you will, of significance is what I'm looking for, not easy. In fact, anything that's worth anything is never easy. That's why it's significant, and very few people ever find it.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what else is true? I was reading a German theologian, Jürgen Moltmann. You know, he's a profound theologian that I imagine he may not be alive today, or maybe, later in life. And he said this, Jim. He says, what are considered virtues for the deep mystics are considered torment and sickness for the modern man or woman. And he uses these quotes: estrangement, inner emptiness, deprivation, poverty, not knowing, and so forth. And he said, what the monks have sought for in order to find God, modern men and women fly from as if it were the devil. And, we just do not like pain and suffering and difficulty and doubts and failures. And yet, God disciplines those he loves. And, I think those are the disciplines. The disciplines are not for the sake of punishment. Disciplines are for the sake of learning and encouragement and growing in faith. And, I'll just end this little diatribe on, if we look at the life of Jesus, that was not an easy life. He was with outcasts. That he dealt with outcasts. He had nothing to do with the power structure. He was always, the mainstream was always out to get him. And then, as the scripture said, he humbled himself to death on a cross. And that is sort of the model for us. And yet, where do we find that model, Jim? Where do we find that we learn from all of these difficulties in our life? It's just not preached today, is it?
No, it's not. Well, you and I had a conversation earlier about it, that I have a renewed passion. And as a pastor, I know not everybody who listens to your podcast is a Christian, so we're going to come through it from the perspective of my background, and I know you are. The truth is, we've lost meaning of what it means to be a follower of Jesus and a disciple, and it's not easy. And so, the meaning and significance of life, it comes from our Creator. He's the one that gives us purpose so that we can make a difference and have a life of significance. And I think the challenge that I have seen is good times make weak men.
Make what?
Weak men. And so we're chasing after the more of the stuff. It's like we didn't got a generation of people and a society of people that didn't have to fight hard battles. They're living in the spoils of the hard work and the battles that were won through future generations. And so when you have them stand up against adversity, they can't stand. They never fought in battles. They never fought any adversity. And so then the challenge becomes your focus is more of the easy, what you think is filling, and it's not. We're not looking for something that temporarily numbs the pain and causes me to check out, and because that's really what I have found. A lot of times when people are saying, the stuff they're pursuing, what it does is it causes them to cope through their pain so they don't have to deal with their pain. And that's what I love about the person you quoted, and even the monks and the practices and disciplines, the people of the past. When you get in solitude, you've got to deal with the real you. You got to go back, and that's why it's painful. That's why it's hard. When you go through adversity, you find out what you're made of, the weaknesses that you have, and the struggle that it is to get up and be disciplined, to have grit. And, but that's the real power of life, because when you can do that, when you learn that, you walk through that, and you become that person, then you can live the life that God called you to, a fulfilled life, regardless of what happens to you. You can make a significant difference because it's in you.
Yes, and I may add to that. It is we are called not to a prosperous life, but to a humble life, and in that humility, and in that sort of cutting down of the ego and what we deserve. And I too frequently talk about the values in America are kind of opposite many times the values of what we consider in the Christian tradition. And right. the values are one of overcoming, recognizing our frailties, recognizing our issues, and then encountering the holy for divine resolution, which is not resolution of gaining things, but it's a resolution of intimacy with God. And
the greatest treasure of all.
The greatest treasure of all. Now, you know what I want to talk about today? Last week, we talked about Unstuck and Unstoppable, and we wanted to get to the Unstoppable, but we spent so much of our time necessarily on the unstuck part of it, in that how we get stuck and we need to, how we can, methodologies and things of getting unstuck. And I asked you if we could do this week and we could talk about Unstoppable. We could talk about how do we progress? How do we transition from that unstuckness to a place fulfillment, emotionally, with our family, and in our spirituality. And you have created a process that I'm very interested in. I like that process, and I've sort of switched around a couple things, but the process is quite simply, it's create an identity statement. You must begin with a clear understanding of who you are, what your talents, skills, interests, your personality, all of those. And then from there, you develop a vision. And I had it written on another piece of paper, but I love it. And then you said vision is vision. Your vision pulls you into the future. I love that verb,
right.
Pulls you into it. A vision is not a push, it's a pull. And I like that very well. And then we're going to talk about, I've got it a little bit out of order, but I like this. We want to talk about subconscious paradigms that sabotage your vision. And I want to spend a bit of time on that, and I think that's very important. Then we will move into creating a plan of action and start working on your plan. Does that sound like an outline that we can go through for you? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I think it cut out. I'm sorry, Charlie.
Oh, okay. The 5 steps that I listed, are they okay
absolutely.
with you? Yeah. And so what we had talked about, you had sent me a very detailed outline of what you wanted to talk about. And, so we're not just talking theoretically. You wanted to add illustrations. And I like your idea of talking about, let's use as an illustration, as sort of a model, a marriage that is stuck, and how does a marriage get unstuck? Now, I know we have a lot of single listeners, but, please know this applies to change in career, change in your primary goals, change in who you want to be. These fit any kind of transformation out of being stuck into being unstuck and being
unstoppable.
Productive, right. Unstoppable, which is productive and fulfilling.
Right. So, and identify even what we're talking about, the 4 essential building blocks of life. It's the identity, the purpose, the vision, the paradigm. As you and I talked about it, when someone is stuck, it can help you get unstuck, but I don't want to just get unstuck. I want to become unstoppable. And that's right. Where I identified, hey, in our life that we get stuck in different areas of life, whether it's marriage, career, health, finances. And yet these 4 essential building blocks of life work in all the areas. But like you said, want to move them around, you can move them around. And the order is not as essential in some regards as much as the fact that it's actually fun. And so we talked about a marriage. If someone says, I feel stuck in marriage, how do I get unstuck? There's some steps that you can take, and that's where you clearly begin to identify and you set them. The first thing, what's the identity for your marriage? Because what we find in a marriage, and I'm speaking as a pastor now, having counseled married couples in crisis and people as part of what I do as a profession, they have been stuck for so long, all they know is their pain. It's all they can see. It's all they experience. So it's not about just giving them steps to move forward a couple of weeks, because it's hard to move forward when you can't even see beyond your day of pain. And so the identity portion of, we're going to help you get unstuck and become unstoppable. But first, what we're going to need to do is we've got to create an identity statement for you and your spouse in the marriage. And if you're stuck personally, then you would create an identity statement for yourself. Maybe you say, well, I don't know who I am. Well, start with, who are you apart from what you do? And that's an amazing place, because what we have found is that most people, their identity comes in what they do or the labels that people have attached to them.
Yes.
So you have to strip away, I'm not who my parents said necessarily. I'm not who my boss or, it's like, okay, who am I? Now in a marriage, if we're saying I'm stuck in my marriage, you would assume you've already got an identity statement, but you need to create an identity statement for you and your spouse. Who are you as a couple? Because it's 2 people who are whole becoming one. So who are we? We're the Kyles. Who are the Kyles? The Kyles are a fun, loving, generous couple, passionately love God and love each other.
And that's your family, identity. The Kyles.
That's our identity. So that's who we are.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So that's who we are. We come together. We're fun, loving. That's the Kyles. Now, once I've got an identity statement, which most people who are stuck do not have an identity. In fact, the circumstances around them have That's why they're drifting. It's like they don't know who they are. And if they're good, then their marriage is good. Their identity is good. They're not doing good, then it's terrible. It's a disaster. You let your environment dictate who you are instead of letting who you are dictate your environment. You want to create an identity statement. Once you have an identity statement and identity as a couple, the second thing is you want to develop a vision.
Wait. We're going to stay on identity statement right now.
Okay. Yep.
I want to hang there, and I want to encourage our audience to know, for our unmarried audience, this has to do with the example. This is not what the whole subject is about, but we're just using this as an example. And I think it's helpful to include all relationships. They could be dating relationships. They could be friendships. In every relationship, there is a third entity. There is you, there is your wife, and then there is the coupling identity. That the two of you form a whole new identity. And so you need to combine each individual sort of state of being, combine that or integrate that into this third entity. And that's the third entity is always there. And so that identity is really twofold or threefold. So kind of walk me through a bit of identity statements as you see it, identity ideas.
And you're absolutely right. If you're in counseling with a marriage therapist, my wife and I, we've been in counseling for years. I grew up in a house where my mom is a licensed therapist. A lot of times they'll tell you, "I'm not for you, husband. I'm not for you, spouse. Fighting for the one in the middle," and then they'll draw a circle around, and say, "This right here in the middle, the relationship, the identity. This is who we're fighting for." Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct. And if we're not even talking about, like you said, we're just using marriage as an example. But truth is, identity, apart from marriage, you've got to know who you are. That's the foundation, and that's what I talk about even in the book. Because before I can create an identity statement for a marriage, if I'm stuck because I'm lost, and a lot of times we'll see the fruit of this in a career. Like if you got a doctor, I've got lots of elderly people who even come here. We have a whole retirement community that's close to where I pastor, and you'll find someone who was in a vocation for their whole life. They retire. How they feel lost. They feel stuck because they're like, I don't know who I am. I was a doctor for so long. I was a lawyer. The very first thing you've got to do if you're feeling that, like, I don't know who I am. I feel lost. I feel like I'm drifting. And who am I? And I think you and I talked about, we may have talked about it, I don't know if it was on a phone conversation or the last podcast, the hardest question you'll ever ask when it comes to identity, or that you'll ever ask and answer, is who am I?
Apart from my career and my schedule, who am I at the core that drives my career and drives my schedule?
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, 20 years ago, someone said we did I was in a self-help seminar and was depressed. I had gone through a real tough season and said, we're going to go on a treasure hunt. And I was like, okay, whatever. This is kind of weird. It was Saturday morning. So we need everybody to separate out, and I'm struggling. I had lost my restaurant, had real estate properties, 7 properties, 4 of which were being foreclosed on. It was all through a situation that was not it was a crooked situation. I ended up going into court and sued him and won, and the situation was still devastating because I had lost identity because business I had owned was no longer functioning. And so I was in this self-help seminar. We're going to go on a treasure hunt. We're going to discover who you really are. And I'm like, this is so dumb. Those words haunted me. Who am I? And I began to answer. I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm this. And the lady said, no, that's what you do. Who are you apart from what you do? Then I started thinking, I'm going to dig deep. I'm like, I'm a failure. I'm disgraced. She said, no, that's what you've experienced. Who are you? So when you peel back the layers of the question, because when someone says, hey, who are you? We always answer with name and vocation. at its vocation, but nobody, and so we never really go back to the levels of depth of who am I. And so here's just one of my identity statements. I'm a disciplined man, full of character and integrity, focused on God. Oh, and I discovered that, just have to be candid, I wasn't disciplined, didn't have character, and I was not focused on God. As I began to really understand this is who I am, my being changed my doing. But I think so many times we're trying to change behavior without knowing who you are. Becoming happens because I know who I am, and then it's out of, and I know who I am, I can become that. I am that. I might not be disciplined today, but I am a disciplined man. I'm going to have to correct that behavior, not because I'm trying to fix external modification of my behavior. It's because I'm becoming who I already am. But identity is powerful.
How do you escape the challenge of switching from what you do to who you are? Because we live in such a comparative culture, and we're comparing ourselves to others, or comparing ourselves even to our own ideals. It doesn't have to be to others, and we're not living up to those ideals, but those ideals can, because they come from outside sources many times, are not consistent with who we are. You talk about time in therapy. I was just telling you earlier, I've been in therapy since I was 40 years old, and I'm 73, so I've 33 years of therapy. I still go monthly to my therapist, and it's just brilliant. He's a combination psychiatrist and spiritual director, and
right.
We're always hammering that out. So in your book, you give plenty ideas about how to create your identity statement, and so that is the beginning. It's that you want to try to get the best handle you can on who you are by creation.
Well, and here's what I know: in different seasons of my life, different layer of who I am was revealed.
Mm-hmm.
You're glad that I don't think sometimes you can't handle all of it at once, and so like I have several identity statements that I had to discover in different pivotal seasons of my life, which is why, the book, when we talk, it's really a field guide, because you go back to it. It's like, not a one and done. And I even write about it, and I've told you, it's not that I'm not going to get stuck again. I'm going to get stuck again. Why? Because we live in a world that is messed up. We all face problems and challenges. I'm just not going to stay stuck, because I've found some tools I've learned to help me discover and move forward with a plan that, okay, I got this. But it always takes work at different levels. And so you were asking about how do you shift the external to the internal, and maybe even how do you know? I think it just goes back to, isn't that what integrity is? When someone is making you, or you're doing something that people are asking you to do, but doesn't line up with the core values of who you are on the inside. I think that's where it's the identity of who am I? Some of the behaviors will change and some won't. My motivation is not to please people or to get approval from people. It's because it's congruent with who I am. It's integrous with who I am. And I think it's interesting that as you discover who you are, there are things that change. And it's because I'm going to be true to my authentic self, and I'm not going to let an external motivation cause me to do something simply because they've labeled me as this or that, and that was my identity. So here, let me maybe give you a case in point. Like today's day and age, it's easy. You could be a teacher. I'm a Christian, and I've talked and coached lots of Christian teachers. If your identity is I'm a teacher, well, then you will conform and compromise for belief system, an environment that is very hostile to what you believe. But if your identity is I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm a Christian, teaches, doing the same thing. I'm still in a classroom, I'm still teaching, but when the situation gets tough, my identity is I am a follower of Jesus, teaches. And if my relationship and identity in Christ right now sabotages my teaching, that's okay because I'm a follower of Jesus. And so my identity then shapes what I do. You'll find if it's not, even if you're a Christian, if you don't know who you are, you allow the fact that you're a teacher to compromise. Now you're living a life that's not integrous with what you believe. It's not based on your values, and it's shifting according to popular opinion because, or culture. Because in the 80s, being a Christian teacher, there was nothing wrong with it. I mean, we would applaud you for praying with your students. Now in 2023, it's a problem. Well, that's why you have to say, who am I? And regardless of culture and situation and circumstance, I'm going to be authentic and true to who I am.
So I would encourage people on this one because, this is a very, I can't tell you how many shows we've talked about, who are we in identity. And so we've covered that a lot on shows, but I want people to check out your book and check out what you have to say with that. And I'd like to move on to our second action, a second step.
Yeah.
And, one that I'm, is my second favorite, and that is vision pulling you into the future. Talk to me about vision is very important, and it is a driver toward the future because it's consistent. It needs to be first. It needs to be consistent with your identity. If it's not harmonious and authentic to your identity, it's going to be a vision that's not going to be gratifying.
That's right.
So use your metaphor of marriage and relationships. Maybe we can call it relationships rather than marriage, and so we're not, narrowing our audience too much.
Sure.
What would you say is an example of a vision of getting unstuck in a relationship and moving on to understanding who we want to be as a couple, of whether it's romantic, friendship, business, whatever that is? What does that vision look like?
Absolutely. Well, and that's such a great question. And I will tell you this, there is such a movement for, visions for your company and all those different things. When I write about vision, it's super simple. It's not near as complex as you think, because here's how I coach people. Vision that we're talking about is what would unstuck in this area of your life look like? Whether it's your career, whether it's your finances, whether it's your health. I'm not talking about an end goal life vision. I think people who are stuck have been stuck for so long they can't even see next year, and much less a lifetime. So the simplicity of it is this: identify what would unstuck in your marriage look like. So that's the beauty of it. You get to identify, if I'm unstuck, what does it look like? Okay, we're going to laugh together. We're going to go on vacations together. We're going to be able to communicate effectively together. You just draw a picture of what that would look like, and you can reevaluate. That's the beauty. To reevaluate it as you get healthier and move forward. But
and it evolves.
Evolves, yes. So it's not like some big and a life. No. What is unstuck? And here's how I coach people. Write down, if I'm in a place that if I could dream about unstuck, write down in just bullet points what that is. Well, what you'll see is those words will begin to create a picture. That's your vision. And you can refine it. You're like, oh yeah. But that's the beauty of that vision. It's so simple. And it's not complex. It's because here's what you're saying, and you are saying it, how pulls you past your day of pain. If you don't have vision, you get stuck in your day of pain. I need something just to pull me beyond where I'm at now, past my day of pain. For some people, that'll be 6 months. Some people, that'll be a year. But the beauty of it is I got something to take me there, whatever there is, and you get to define that.
Yeah, I totally agree. When it comes to relational vision, this is something that needs to be done as a couple, and
Yes.
and it can be, like I said, a romantic couple. It could be a friendship couple, and it could be a couple of 2 men or 2 women that are talking about, our friendship is not quite what we want it to be, and there needs to be, there needs to be dialogue in there, don't you think? That we're talking
absolutely.
about what do we want
100%.
together?
Yes, well, you're exactly right on that, because it's got to be a cohesive vision, especially when you're talking about what's. What would that look like for me? What would that look like for you? And then together we build the image together of where we see ourselves as we're unstuck. And it is a collaboration, and it is an agreement, and it is, because it doesn't do you any good to write something out if that's not both of your vision for where you want it to go. Absolutely.
So give me an idea. You and your wife have a vision for your marriage. Can you share what that vision might look like?
Yeah, so an example of a vision statement is to create a loving and happy relationship. Not only brings continuous joy to us, but to everyone around us. We're joy-filled. Everywhere we go, people experience the joy of our relationship. Super simple. It's like, that's the vision of our life. That means we're conversating, and we get to color it in with, we're able to, be romantic. We're able to hold conversations, to communicate. We're demonstrating living a joy-filled life together, others to see and experience. That's super. Again, I think people who, if you can feel very overwhelmed with it, it's easier than you think. The beauty of it, and you could probably hear the joy in my tone, is you get to create what you want. And as you see it, here's the power of the subconscious and the unconscious. And you can see it, your life will start to bring it to fulfillment. It'll start to be produced in your life just by clearly having a vision, which is why when you're stuck, it's so dangerous if the only thing you can see is the pain that you're in. Because consciously, subconsciously, and unconsciously, you're going to the self-fulfilling prophecy. You're going to fulfill the very thing that you see, which is pain, hurt, turmoil, chaos. And so it begins to be really fun when you say, and it's not easy. Look, if you've been in pain, it is hard to see. Like you and I talked about this last time. If I counsel couples, it's like, hey, tell me why you got married. And if they've gone past that day of pain and they've been there for a long time, they're like, I don't even know I married him. I can't even believe it. I regret again, they've been in it so long, they're not stuck, they're stranded.
I know.
Yeah, so now it's fun to say, well, what would it look like and dream and see them begin to take steps towards that is an amazing thing.
As a couple, something that's helped Pam and I think it pertains to any relationship, and that there's several, but just as I'm just thinking here off the top of my head, two things are very important. One is the commitment and ability to withhold judgment, to shut up.
Yes.
That we don't need to throw judgment at our other partner, other friend, other spouse. It is withholding judgment and radical acceptance. And I think my wife and I are at this place, now this is 37 years of marriage. We're at this place of pretty much total acceptance. And when we disagree on something, it doesn't get hostile and volatile most of the time, but, we're human. But it is such respect for my wife and my wife's respect for me that we just don't ask silly questions, and we don't ask invasive questions. So my life has to be so transparent that all of my thoughts are transparent, and for goodness sake, I don't want anybody knowing all my thoughts, because those are not pretty.
Right, sure.
But it is this commitment to mutual understanding, acceptance, non-judgmentalism. But that doesn't mean we don't face critical issues, but we do them when we face them. We do them to the best degree we can. We do them with kindness.
Oh, that's powerful. Well, it sounds it's the mutual respect and
Yes.
the love, the respect. And as you do that, that's half the battle with any relationship. We become too familiar. We become complacent. We're short, sharp. We stop being kind, grace-filled. And I love what you said. Here's something we talked earlier. I love what you do. You got to explain what you guys do after Christmas, before the New Year. You guys get away. You do your time together. What it sounds to me is that you don't try to judge each other's motives either. The behavior doesn't sit well with you. In other words, I think the problem with a lot of people is we attack motives instead of giving grace if the behavior didn't sit well. It's like, no, I know you love me. It didn't feel like your motive might have felt off. I'm going to believe the best in you. You love me. You didn't mean that. So grace-filled, so kind, so considerate. And with relationships where they tend to go south is see a behavior and we judge judge it as a negative impact to us. Like, it's crazy. So anyway, love what you talked about and talking about how you do the planning after Christmas.
You know what I want to do? I want to go into we have 3 more tactics or pieces to the process, but I want to talk about one that I think is really powerful, and that's identifying your subconscious paradigms that are sabotaging your vision, and you must change them. But what I want to do, Jim, before we do that is take a quick break, and we'll come right back and we'll jump into this deep topic. That's a podcast in itself, but we will do that. Can you hang in for a minute?
Absolutely.
Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you are listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, my very, very, very special guest, Jim Kyles, and we are talking about his book, Unstuck and Unstoppable, and today we're talking about what sort of tactics, processes, program can we use to move on to unstoppable, and if feeling not possible to do, we can move forward always. And it's always moving forward, unstoppable in the vision of moving forward. And your third part of your process is identify any subconscious paradigms that sabotage your vision. And I'm going to list 3 things that I got from your book, and I want you to talk about them in any order that you feel like. One, you say, and it's because now we're talking we really are getting into psychological and into what our past, our history, our environmental experience, history of environment, and you put 3 things that I really liked, and so approach them any way you want. The first one is your thoughts determine your future. I so believe that. If you have negative thoughts, you're going to have a negative future. And secondly, another powerful quote, you don't get stuck in life because what happens to you, you get stuck in life because what happens in you. And the to you impacts the in you. So they're not unrelated. And the third one that you suggest is if you want to change your life, change your thoughts. Talk to me all about thoughts and what's going on inside us and changing thoughts. I think this is a powerful piece to your paradigm.
Absolutely. Well, just as you know so well, thoughts determine your life right now. In fact, I've said it like this: you are today what you thought yesterday, will be tomorrow what you think today.
Can I say that easier? I have a quote that I use. Can I give you a quote?
Yes.
You are who you have been becoming.
Oh, that's powerful.
Isn't it? I heard
That's
it in the
powerful.
80s. I didn't make that up.
Absolutely.
I heard it in the 80s.
And here's the beauty of it. You can change your thoughts, which means if I can change my thoughts, I can change my life.
So, yes,
Don't have to
with
be a
that,
victim.
you are tomorrow, you are what you are today. You're becoming what you are today. So today really isn't that old tired phrase, today's the first day of the rest of your life, but it is.
That's right.
Because you can change the direction of your life beginning with one day that's followed by disciplined behavior.
That's exactly right.
But go on with your thoughts.
And it's interesting. Well, it's fascinating because we have become such an instant gratification society, and we're all subject to it. Nobody wants to wait for food to be made through fast food, microwave. We want our life to change instantly as well, but it just doesn't happen like that. You're talking about the paradigm, subconscious paradigm. That's the programming that you've been building since birth. So I'm 46 years young, and
yes, young.
At the end of the day, that means if I'm trying to change my life, one day of changing my thoughts is not going to wipe out 46 years of programming.
No.
So it's the continual reprogramming and thinking new thoughts that they do make a difference. You may not see it all in one moment, but the power of changing your thoughts is a truth that when you really discover it, I'm not a victim to my environment. It's not as important what happens to me. It's important what happens in me. And so if I can constantly reshape my thoughts into, and that's the power of the identity statements, right? It's not good enough to have an identity statement. What are you doing? You're changing your thought. I am a disciplined man, full of character and integrity, focused on God. See, I wasn't disciplined. What I would do is say, man, I'm so undisciplined, so lazy, I'm so da-da-da. Now, don't typically say that consciously. Subconsciously, that's the program.
It is.
Whenever I would begin to think that, I said, no, I'm changing my thinking. I am a disciplined man with integrity, character, and I'm focused on God. What will happen is I said it because it's who I am, and I'm declaring it and speaking it. Then I'm reading, changing the thought pattern of my life. I'm redefining who I am, what I consume. Because what you consume garbage in is garbage out. So changing your thoughts is so powerful. And it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. I get to do that. It's not complex. It's just the discipline of doing it.
Yeah, you added
the pain
the second.
of today is great. Mm-hmm.
You added the second thing that I think is really important. You have to change your thoughts, but your thoughts have to translate into disciplines. If they don't translate into disciplines, then it's very difficult to make the changes that you want, don't you think?
That's right. Well, and I think part of that is if you got the discipline to change your thoughts, you're going to see that fruit in your life. Yes, it takes both and. It's not just a, hey, I think it. Now you live it out. It is amazing that as you change your thinking, you have the discipline and the wherewithal to stay with it, your life really does change. Because it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody. I told you, I think I said it at the last podcast, National Science Foundation had a study, and they found that we have anywhere from 12 to 60,000 thoughts in a day. 80% of those are negative. 5 to 95% of them are repetitive. But we never change our thinking. Most of the thinking we have is negative, and then we wonder how we're living in this life of sabotage and brokenness and dysfunction. Well, half the battle is watch your thoughts. And I do a whole inventory. One of the things that I love about the thinking is inventory your thoughts. Someone says, well, I don't know what I'm thinking. Well, just start writing down every thought that you can think. Start taking a journal. You're driving. Okay, well, hold on. I've got some thoughts. I'm thinking it down. And what you'll do is you inventory your thoughts. You'll begin to see a pattern of the thinking that has got you into the life that you're living right now. It's like when you want to manage money. Goal is you want to manage money is not to bring in more money. First, I've got to account for the money that I bring in. And then begin to build a budget and a plan to bring more increase in income into my life. But the key to solving your life is not more money. It's where do I spend my money right now? It's got to be a good thing with your life. The first thing I coach people to is let's take a thought inventory. Let's spend the next 3 to 4, 5 days and just writing down, and you'll find the pattern thinking that is influencing where you're at in your life.
Might I make a suggestion or something that has worked for me that I created 25 or 30 years ago in my second book, Getting the Right Things Right, Personal Strategies for Reinventing the Life You Want. I structured it around 4 P's: passion, purpose, people, and praise. And what I would say is, what do I need to do on a regular basis to maintain passion in my life? What do I need to do on a regular basis to perform acts of purpose that satisfy my skills and my talents and how I can make a difference in society and in my culture and in my family? The third is people. Who are the key people, and what do I need to do to maintain relationships with those people? And finally, praise is what is my, what activities am I doing to gain intimacy with God? And then I would only, I wouldn't put lists of dozens. It would be a list of 3, 4, 5 things under each section, that sort of were highlight. And I would not check those daily. I would not check those weekly. I would just check them monthly. And all I did was put a plus, check, or minus. I'm doing really well. I'm doing okay. I need improvement. And that was always reminding me of what I needed to do to move my life to the next level. And I even got to where I had my values, and I would check my living according to my values and my relationship with my wife. What does my wife want with me? I got rather anal on it. And now I'm not quite so anal because I own this process. This process has become part of me, but I still will go back and check and see how I'm doing. So it agrees with you. You need to articulate it, and I think write it down. If you don't write it down, you're not going to remember it.
That's right. Well, and I love what you're doing too, because something that we miss in society, it's easy to miss because we live in such a fast-paced world, but it's not experience that matters most. It's evaluated experience.
Oh,
you're evaluating.
Yeah.
Like, did I do it? Did I not? It's not even about, I got to have this whole paragraph on it. It's just evaluating. I hit it today. Did I not today? And that's half the battle, is just the awareness of, and just a little focus on, like you said. It is amazing how much of a difference that makes. And actually, I just up your book. I'm excited to read it and get into it even more. I love that, the passion, purpose, people, and praise, and evaluating. Love it.
You know what quote it reminds me is that old, often used phrase from Socrates that the unexamined life is not worth living.
So good.
And then there's another one, the guy Kawasaki from Apple said, the unlived life is not worth examining.
Wow, both are powerful and true.
Both are powerful. So it really is your thoughts, your psychology, what is your history of belief, and are those consistent with who you want to be, who you are inside, and that is, not everybody has desire for therapy or has the resources for therapy, but if you can find a good therapist, and there's not as many out there as you would think, but if you find a good therapist, that can really help you in that. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm in counseling. Of course, I would agree.
Let's move on. Let's move on to number 4, okay? Because as we're running close to time here, and that is create a plan of action. And I think, is this the one where you did the stop, start, continue, or is that something?
That's right.
Yeah, it is. I've been teaching that for 30 years. That's a great way to evaluate any particular behavior in any typical circumstance.
Right.
What do I want to start? What do I want to stop? And what do I want to continue doing? I think that's a brilliant methodology.
Absolutely. Well, the action plan is what puts feet to all of the vision and what we're doing. It doesn't do any good just to have a whole bunch of stuff hanging on a wall. I got to now, what's the plan that's going to get me there? What are the steps that are going to get me the vision that I now see? So if you want to have an effective marriage or relationship where you're communicating, then what are you going to do? If you don't know how to communicate now, well, a step is let's start reading a book on effective communication. Let's read it and talk through it once a week. It's an action step. If I want more intimacy in my relationship and not physical intimacy, just intimacy, you're not going to build that if you don't go on dates. You don't do what it takes to build intimacy in the relationship. And so you just have to identify and break down steps that will move you forward into vision that you have identified that Unstuck looks like. They're very practical, simple. It doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but I'm taking steps. Remember, the goal is to get unstuck. Stuck means just one step forward, one step better. And I didn't get in this situation overnight. I'm probably not going to get out of it overnight. I now have some steps, an action plan. Then I'm going to begin to work that out, which is where the purpose part. Purpose is I am focused on my assignment. So in regards to purpose in a marriage, and again, I'm not talking, there's a term purpose like my ultimate purpose in life. Purpose for me, as I define it in the book, is my assignment right now. What am I supposed to be doing? That's the purpose that I'm fulfilling.
That's
in the
powerful.
marriage.
That's powerful.
Right. So what is that? That's the purpose part. Now I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Because see, people get stuck because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. It's like I feel lost. I got my action plan. My assignment is fill the action plan. Take these steps. And it's very easy then to see, am I living a life of purpose? Yes, I am living with purpose in my marriage because I'm going on dates, because I'm reading a book on communication, because we're learning how to develop what it is we're trying to create. I'm living a relationship with purpose. It's that simple.
I've got a question. We have a fifth, and I'll just say our fifth step is start working on your plan. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. You've got to create a time schedule. What are you going to do? But I have an in-between question that has come up through all of this. This whole process feels almost rather anal. What if people just do not have the wherewithal? I mean, they just don't have the capacity to do this much work on it. Is there anything else they can do? I mean, because we're going to get a lot of people that say, I buy this, I love this, but I just don't have time. I'm, like you said last week, I'm homeschooling, I'm working, I'm doing, I don't have time for this. What are there alternatives? I mean, are there hacks to this that could help? I mean, I don't want to dismiss the whole process because I believe wholeheartedly in the whole process, but I'm just thinking of how many people really can do this. Is this reasonable, Jim? What do you think?
Well, it goes back to, there's a couple, I'll answer it in two ways. Number one, are there things you can do besides this? You can, but you're going to live in a dysfunctional system. So in other words, it depends on what your goal is. Your goal just exist and cope and make it, sure, you can do some things. There's a few things. You can hack it. Oh, you can make it to where, we're existing. It's not what it was. Remember, the goal of my whole purpose of the book is I don't want you just unstuck, or I wrote a book called Unstuck. I want you unstoppable. Does it take a lot of work? It does. That's why it's worth it, because if you'll do the work, it may take me 6 months, a year, 2 years. I'm going to be married to this person or in this relationship for the rest of my life. It's 2 years, the rest of my life. Got married when I was 20. Yeah. I'm 45 now. I got another 40 years. But just goes back to what your pain point is. What are you looking for? You're looking for just getting unstuck? Cool. There's some things. You could do a few of these and navigate through. But if you're asking to build an unstoppable life, I've not found shortcuts.
It takes
hard work.
It's going to
takes
take work.
focus.
And it's going to take time, Jim. Like we talked
time.
about today in that reading that I had this morning in one of my inspirational readings, and it talked about the slow work of God. And
That's right.
We want God to, we're going to say a prayer and have that prayer answered in the next few days or a week. And the cross took 3,000 years to occur, and we're still trying to figure it out 2,000 years later. This whole thing, the work of God is complete, is full, and takes care of us, but it just doesn't happen in our timing.
You're absolutely right. It just is hard, and so there is no easy way, but it goes back to the pain of being stuck that you're willing to deal with, either the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And I wish there was a quick pill we could take, but we know with dieting, with everything, it just doesn't work.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you what, Jim Kyles, it is such a pleasure talking to you, and that we seem to track so much. And I want to thank you and pray for your book to have impact on people, and for your church that you can grow your people in life and in love and in harmony with the divine. I wish the very best for you.
Well, thank you, Charlie. It has been such a privilege to build this friendship, and an honor to be on this podcast with you, and so grateful for all the things that I've learned. You and I have had conversations from the podcast, and really enjoy it. What a wealth of wisdom, and so grateful. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, I also want to thank all our listeners for tuning into the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.